Matthew!
Hey.
Yeah. You went full Lane Staley on me for a second. Yeah. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm
It's
good.
been so long since I've seen you.
Yes.
A whole 24 hours, maybe? Jeez.
Roughly, yeah. Yeah. Hey, nothing wrong with that.
So it's a big day today.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how I
Matt, are
do
you
here.
nervous? You're like giving me nervous vibes this
I
morning.
am wildly underprepared. I'm not
Wildly underprepared.
unprepared, but I am definitely underprepared. Um,
So
I haven't even finished.
So remember, I mean, this is our first foray into Matt's prepping for a game he's going to run at some point.
Theoretically, in the future, yes. I have to find people to play it.
Yeah. Oh, come on. You
Eh,
know you'll have people to play. I mean,
But
it's the finale of Mega Matt Stream Week. I never thought about that, but isn't it kind of a Mega Matt Stream Week? Well pointed
it
out.
has been. I have been streaming more this week than most. That's true.
How do you feel about that?
It's really all just about balancing, uh, you know, my life with, um,
Hey, Super Spike.
this and making sure that I am not, putting myself in a position
Shaggy.
where,
Everybody's here.
wow, where I'm getting stressed out about stuff. So,
But do you feel like you have a good balance?
no. But that's
To
me. It's not because of the streams. Even if I hadn't done any streams at all this week, I would still be feeling like I had things that I needed to do that I hadn't, and all that. That's just my stupid brain.
But isn't that just the nature of the beast? As far as we
Yeah,
always have so much left.
it's true. It is true. I mean, I won't deny that, but I do. There is a part of me that hopes that at some point I'll be able to, feel like I've got things under control enough that taking a couple hours out of the day to stream or whatever, or work on a game or something. There's definitely times where I do have that. I feel like that's okay, but it does it varies, and more often than not, it just feels like I'm blah, and so
I think that's hard to not feel like sometimes though.
oh, absolutely, yeah. No, I mean that's just life.
Mitch, you doing okay?
Yeah, you doing all right, Mitch?
I mean, that's a you put that out there, and we're gonna worry. We're gonna be concerned. We're gonna ask because we care. I mean, it's just who we are.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, that'll.
Oh God, yeah. Duh. Now I feel real dumb. Sorry.
That'll do it. Absolutely. Jeez.
Ugh.
Well, I hope you and yours are doing all right for the moment.
Yeah. Be as safe as you possibly can in the midst of a fucking natural disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's. Jeez. I feel really dumb now for even been like, you okay? Hey friend, are you okay? And then I ask something dumb like that, and it's like, oh, there's a fucking hurricane, morons.
And you're also helping out at or doing emergency shelter staff. Okay.
Well, that's because you're awesome.
I mean, that's definitely part of it that he, that Mitch is doing that. Yes, I'm,
That's amazing. That's
I'm
real. It
glad
really is.
they're there to help. Oh well, so
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You're
yeah,
still there, and you're still putting the work in, and you're helping others. And I don't care if that's my job, but it's still, it's still important, and it should still be pointed out that it's most of us who work in fields like this. It's not like we're making a bunch of money. You're generally doing it because of your concern for other human beings. So I salute you. Well, I hope everybody's doing okay. We do care, and we are cruising quickly up upon the triumvirate appreciation night. We talked to Beard. Beard probably can't make it because he is teaching a class, but he is going to send a pre-recorded message, which is just it's peak Beard. So, all right. Well, now that now that I've killed a bunch of time for you, Matt. Matthew,
yes.
what do you want to work on when it comes to putting together your G.I. Joe game?
I suppose the best thing to work on at this point, because obviously I have no idea who's going to be playing in it, or even really like I'm about, I don't know, halfway through the book here, maybe a little over, and I'm just getting into like there we go, the combat rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea how this game actually plays. It's a lot more complex than anything I've played in a long time. But I am curious to see how it's going to work. Yeah, it's interesting to dive into this and, get a sense of something, and because I haven't really, I mean, I did a little bit of Game Master stuff way back when, but the group fell apart almost immediately, not because of me, I don't think. Just scheduling and stuff like that. We didn't really have any good place to play.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's difficult though. When you're trying to I have found that when you're putting together a group and you're trying to get something like that going, you really do have to have a strong center to hold everybody together. You do need almost like a little cult of personality in the middle to kind of force, especially when you're younger.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the other thing too is I feel like we're all old enough to have experienced this, but in the days before you could do this, you had to all get together in a physical space, and do this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, we all live in apartments and we have roommates, or some of us live out of town and it's hard to get into town, or like we don't want to go to the library because we'd just be sitting out in the middle of the room, yelling about dragons and shit. So it's it was more difficult, uphill both ways in the snow, I gotta say.
Yeah.
To play an RPG. So now obviously it's a lot easier, though not easy, to find a group and get people together because you've got the the online option, but it can still be hard to coordinate schedules and get people who are willing to play consistently.
Yeah, I mean, and I try to be honest about this with the particular health concerns that I have. There can be cancellations, there can just be times where I don't have the physical or the mental spoons to be able to run games for people, and that in itself can be very difficult because it's people set around, like you said, we're adults, we set aside time, and then it falls apart for what some people can perceive as no reason, and that's very hard.
Yeah. No, I try and be, I mean, obviously with what you've got going on, I'm, I understand. And the big thing for me anyway, as somebody who is generally disinclined to do things with people. I'm not a super social guy. So for me it's always like, yeah, let's make the plans. Let's say, yep, here's the thing we're going to do, here's when we're going to do it. And then if if a few hours before or the day before it's like, no, I feel like shit, let's not do it. For me it's like, great, bonus time. I can do whatever I want with that time now. I only get pissed about it when people are like, we should do something and let's do it tomorrow, but I'm not going to tell you what time or where.
Yeah.
Till the last minute. And it's like, well, great, now I got to not do anything, even if I wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
I got to not do anything. Or, obviously if it's like, okay, we're all going to get together and go to a movie or an event or something, there you can't, if you're, unless you have a good reason to cancel last minute. But also I'm still probably going to go and enjoy myself. Anyway, but so yeah, for me, it's like, cool, let's make the plans, cancel them, before it's time, and cool, I got a bonus couple hours to watch a movie or play a game or whatever the hell I want to do. That doesn't bother me. Anyway.
All right, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You go for it.
I was going to say, so what my thought would be very beneficial to start off with is what I start off with now every time. So there's 2 worksheets here.
Okay.
Campaign planner and the truths of the game.
Okay.
I feel like you can either go with either one first. And these are more broad themed rather than like crunchiness.
Right.
So I always look at like, you need to have at least 3 of these. Like, what are the truths of your game? What are the facts of every situation going forward in the games that you're going to be running, as far as in this G.I. Joe game?
Right. What was it in the campaign planner was the other one. So
yeah, campaign planner is a little bit more like, what's the hook?
In depth.
What are the fronts? So fronts are not always your villains, but like events or disasters or other things that are antagonistic towards your players and the world. And the reason they're called fronts is they continue to move as the game goes along. You don't actually have to be dealing with these directly, and they're still going to move forward. And that's what the Grim Portents are as well. How do you know they're moving forward?
Okay.
And what is the goal of the campaign? What are these fronts? What's their goal? What's their end game? And then when you go back to the truths, so you talk about like death is permanent. That's a truth of a game.
Right.
There will be hard life and death decisions. It's an adult game or whatever, when I did Domains of Dread, it was like, this is a horror game. Horrific things are going to happen. That was the truth of the game. And then I listed like, there will be body horror. There will be like Lovecraftian horror. Rules of the game would be, something like, for like Domains of Dread was a good one where I had to be like, this isn't a funny game, so I don't want any like, my character's name is Bob Ross and he's a bard who does paintings.
Right.
So I use this like set tone, and then Appendix N is like, hey, here are the things you can look at to get a vibe for what I'm doing. It can be books, it can be music, it can be, it can be movies, it can be whatever you want it to be.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, I remember some of this from the Hard Times prep. So, all right. Well, I'm going to share my screen since I've got this stuff up.
Sweet.
And that way I'll be able to put these in a form that I can interact with. But let me move the chat over here so I can still keep track of things. All right. So I think you have to approve my share. There it goes. All right. So, and I'm absolutely open to input from anybody in the chat or yourself, Benjamin, about this kind of stuff. Now, I love G.I. Joe in all its forms. But my bread and butter is the Larry Hama comics. That's what I gravitate towards. That is, I would say, a fairly realistic depiction, but still very much in that comic book realm of possibilities and tone. There are characters who joke, there are characters who don't. Fantastic stuff can happen. Death is not necessarily the end, but it's still a big deal.
So I would immediately put that as your top and your appendix N. Is Larry Hama G.I. Joe run. I think that's a no-brainer. That to me sounds like it's the backbone of your tone.
It definitely is.
So as someone who's familiar with that, but isn't necessarily wrote in it, would a good comparison be Ostrander Suicide Squad or Gail Simone's Secret Six?
Yeah,
maybe not character-wise, but tone-wise.
Even to a degree, like I would say the Suicide, like the James Gunn Suicide Squad film.
Then yeah, I'd put it down on your list. To me, when I think about those things, I think with Suicide Squad and Secret Six, there's a tone that's similar. Like I was just reading, I picked up a bunch of library copies of some old Secret Six trades for mega cheap because I've been wanting to go back and reread those. And there's an issue where Deadshot calls upon the priest that he used to speak to in the Suicide Squad.
Yes.
And I was like, this feels very G.I. Joe-ish.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like where he's like, yeah, I'm not feeling very like suicidal, but I am feeling very homicidal. Like if I had a gun in my hands right now, I would kill everyone in this room. You'd all be dead.
I'm trying to think of some movies that maybe capture the tone that people would be more likely to have seen.
Hateful Eight?
That's too dark.
Too dark?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about oh man, what's the kung fu flick Tarantino did? All of a sudden I can't think about it.
Oh, Kill Bill?
Kill Bill?
I mean, yeah, probably some of that, but maybe more like Con Air.
Perfect. That's awesome. That's a really good. So those Bruckheimer action flicks.
Yeah, The Rock, I suppose, is very G.I. Joe in its way. Yeah, I love the Sunbow cartoon, and I even have a soft spot for the Deke cartoon, which is arguably bad. But I'm not opposed to, like running something in that world.
I think we talked about this before about this idea that maybe that's like a simulation.
Yeah, and I could see that. I could see that as something. I don't know. Let's see. So in turning this over in my mind this past week, mostly because it's my job is at a point lately where I still need to be there and be paying attention to stuff, but it's a lot of just nothing in between that. And I don't really have any clear direction on what I could be doing with that time or any inspiration on, it's like, could I work on general stuff that might enrich the position or the organization or whatever, yeah, but I haven't really gotten any direction in that point or any indication that it would be well received if I did.
So you have like it's like mental free time. I had this at a job a while back where
Oh no, I've
I
literally just
could,
sitting at my desk reading this.
yeah, where I am, my brain is able to do the job so quickly and efficiently that I don't need to, like, it's just not eating up my time. So I had a lot of mental free time, and I would just do all my D&D stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember where the quote originated, but it came to me through GI Joe, which is being a soldier is endless stretches of internal boredom punctuated by brief flashes of sheer terror.
So I ran a program back in the day that was 4 and 5 to 1. So it means we had 4 or 5 people for one person.
Oh wow.
And my boss's boss would say, you know, this is $1 million program. It's arguably the most difficult program in the state. I treat you guys, because one time I went in and I said, can we use the budget to buy a PlayStation 2? This says how old this was.
Right.
And he approved it like immediately. And my boss was like, why did you approve that? And he said, because this house is like the Navy SEALs of what we do. It's hours and hours and hours of nothing, punctuated by moments of extreme intense violence. So I want these guys to be sharp, but I also want them to stick around.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them, you know, more leeway when it comes to, like, you can only like mop the floor so many times. So if they want a PlayStation 2, they're getting a PlayStation 2. And I think that's kind of some of those jobs in military service, especially, even more so. It's like that. Like you said, there's times where nothing's going on, and then there's times where everything is going on. So another one I know we talked about previously that I would ask is Thunder Agents.
See, I'm not familiar with Thunder Agents beyond knowing that they exist.
It's that idea of people who go to work for the government. They're given special abilities, but it will kill them.
Yeah.
So I would say the Order is
the Order is the Marvel equivalent, which I definitely am familiar with.
Yeah, which I think we both really liked.
Oh yeah. So for the general thing that I've been kind of mulling over and thinking about as possible, at least beginning storyline, and I kind of wish that, and I suppose it was just a timing thing. Maybe they just needed to fill an arc or whatever. But in the original run, there is a bit. It was the one issue that Todd McFarlane drew, actually, and he drew an entire second issue, but then they had, I think, Russ Heath redraw it for whatever reason. The editor didn't like it, so anyway,
that's wild.
Todd McFarlane did an entire issue of G.I. Joe in 86 or 87, I want to say, and it was the Hasbro probably mandated thing that Hama felt he had to do or was told to do by editorial. Like, all right, here's the new characters for the year, get them in the book. And I think he just kind of decided to do it all at once and then not really use most of them ever again.
Okay.
So he met his obligations. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff where you're like, oh yeah, I'll use this character, but I hate them, so I'm going to find a way to get rid of them as soon as I can. Well, I focus on the stuff that actually interests me, or the characters that do, which is what just those weird things about working on a licensed book. But he brought in the new 87 Joes, Chuckles, Fast Draw, Law and Order. Who else was in that issue? Anyway, it was Lieutenant Falcon. It was like 5 or 6 characters, and they're all out there, on this mission And then it turns out that they're not actually GI Joes. They were just told that they were part of the GI Joe unit and to go like stand around this old like mothballed but still cool and advanced looking rocket that they had in a warehouse. Basically because I'll have to reread the issue, but it was basically just like some group in the CIA or some part of DOD that was like, we have our own agenda. We're going to tell this bunch of guys that they're on the GI Joe team now and kind of use them for our own purposes.
Oh, nice.
And that's an interesting hook to me. That's how I, in my mind, envision GI Joe Extreme. But they're literally like they're in on it. That's the in my mind, GI Joe is DOD, and GI Joe Extreme would be CIA, and they're the guys that the CIA is like, yeah, we're gonna have our own GI Joe team. They're gonna do whatever the hell we tell them to, and they're gonna do nasty shit.
So would Falcon and Winter Soldier on Disney Plus be another?
Possibly. This is going to be more. So this would be more in the vein of like traditional GI Joe, but my hook was that
I just mean in the fact that you have governments.
Oh yeah, the government. That's a recurring theme in Larry's work is that while these soldiers may be individually honorable and brave and doing the right thing, the people telling them what to do have an agenda, and they don't care about them.
To me, which is very much like all of a sudden I can't remember dude's name who did all those great run on Captain America when I was a kid that had like Streets of Poison and all that. Where
Mark Gruenwald.
Gruenwald, yeah, who I think also did Squadron Supreme.
Yep.
So you could see a lot of kind of that similar, like the government is definitely running its own agenda. The fact that Cap stopped being Cap at one point because of that, and then bringing John Walker in because it was, it's not about Steve Rogers, it's about us having a symbol. I do like that idea too of like GI Joe in some ways being a symbol, and then you have the rest of them that do the real dirty work.
Yeah, these are Joes that
you're not
don't know about.
Yeah, you're not getting a parade if you're in this.
And they would not want, and that was how the Renegades were, originally kind of referred to, and they never really appeared much in the comics. And the cartoon obviously kind of shaved off the edges. But the way Larry wrote those file cards for them, it's like, oh, these guys like do the nasty shit,
the dirty work.
And one of them is like a circus strongman with a scimitar. All right, cool. But got
a little Sandow going.
Absolutely. So my idea for this was to kind of have a similar situation where it's this group of soldiers or whoever, because G.I. Joe and the book makes it clear too that you don't necessarily have to be a soldier. There's cases, at least in the the lore of like Quick Kick was a stuntman.
Really?
In the cartoon, he was just doing stuntman stuff, and they're like, hey, you should join the G.I. Joes. In the comics, I think it's at least implied and on the file card that he actually joined the military.
I love that idea that he was just like a dude, and they were like, hey, you should join G.I. Joe.
Yeah, in the cartoon that happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, not all the time, but often enough. Or you get, somebody like Storm Shadow who was in the military, left the military, ninja assassin, and then comes back, and they probably just fudge some paperwork and say, okay, well, you're called back to active duty.
So weird.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that just, okay, sure, why not? Or Link Talbot, who was a veterinarian, but also maybe a Navy SEAL at one point. Yeah, we need a veterinarian, so you're in.
Yeah. Welcome to G.I. Joe.
Yeah. Wait, what?
What have I done to myself?
I didn't want to do that.
I feel very, very tricked here.
A new group of Joes And the idea being that, again, like this previous team or my division of G.I. Joe Extreme, they're not actually answering to anybody in G.I. Joe proper. They'll be given reasons for this if they ask. But basically, my idea is, and they mention it in passing in the book here when they're talking about Zartan. They're like, what do we, what's wrong with Zartan, or what's going on in Zartan's head that he hasn't just turned himself into the president and taken over?
That is an interesting question.
And
flat out, that's an interesting,
yeah, well, and that's always been another interesting thing to me about G.I. Joe, because if you put all the pieces together, if you've read the comics, so even comic Cobra Commander should have everything he wants through over the 30 plus years of G.I. Joe comics. He's got a robot army. He's got his own sovereign nation that he got through various means. He's got functional immortality as long as he keeps on Dr. Mindbender's good side or finds a way to steal his shit. Because Dr. Mindbender can clone people and copy existing people's memories. So there's nothing there that would stop you from essentially, all right, well, I'm getting old or I'm hurt. Make me an extra body, drop my brain into it.
Boom. I always forget sometimes how crazy supervillain sci-fi G.I. Joe actually is.
Yeah. So and Cobra Commander obviously has massive amounts of money. So why is he still even he's done everything that he arguably could want to do. He hasn't conquered the world, but I don't know if he even thinks that would be practical.
But, yeah, what if that was just a front for what he actually wanted?
Well, what I think it is for him is it's ego. And if you go to his car salesman origins in the comics, he's basically your grassroots, organizer. And there's a part of him, he's a dictator and he's very much in it for himself. And I don't know how much of it he actually believes, but his brother got killed. Or his brother went to Vietnam, came back. It destroyed him as a person. He turned to drugs and alcohol and died as a result. So Cobra Commander blames the United States for killing his brother, essentially. And that was his inciting incident. Now, I think over the years it's become twisted and it's more just okay, well, I want power for the sake of power. But there's still a part of him that I think wants to prove people wrong and wants people to acknowledge that he wants people to choose him.
He wants to be the tribal chief.
Yeah. He knows he's right, and that if they just let him do what he wanted to do, the world would be a much better place.
He's just you'll acknowledge me.
Nobody will listen. And that's because what that has, and whether he realizes it or not, I don't know what else would drive you at the point where it's you have a country, you're in charge of a country, and you're rich, and you're immortal, and you're still going to go poke the bear. So that's really interesting to me. And yes, Mitch, I'm with you. Is that I think Zartan just wants to fuck around.
Until he finds out.
Yeah. And Comic Zartan is another interesting character because he, got into, tried to be a ninja and stuff, and kind of goes back and forth between being this honorable man and not. And yeah, he's a very interesting character. But yes, anyway, so my idea being that, and Zarana would absolutely do this because she is very much more just a selfish and sort of mercenary sort of individual. So I could see her just doing this because it's going to make her a lot of money or get her a spot where she wants to be. But my idea is that Zarana in disguise is essentially the handler for this group of Joes, and she'll call in her brother Zartan every now and then if one of these people is like, well, I heard like Duke was in charge. Where's Duke? And then Zartan can put on his Duke mask or whatever and come in there and throw around some Yo-Joes and then fuck off again while Zarana actually runs the show. So that would be rather than have it, come out immediately, this would be kind of a slow burn mystery thing that the characters could either figure out or not.
So I would ask you a question like I'm always trying to balance.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of this in my games as well. Do you let the players know this is going on, but trust them to not metagame? Like the players know, but their characters don't.
I would not want to tell them. No.
Okay.
I would, which, so don't watch this, players in the future. I would want them to figure it out on their own.
Okay.
And have that, because the other thing too is none of these characters are stupid, so they're not going to be like overtly like, hey, go steal these drugs from these drug lords and bring them back to me so we can do something with them, or go kill a bunch of civilians. Like, they're going to make it look like they're going to give them stuff to do that's at least plausibly something that the G.I. Joe team would do.
Would Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. be another good Appendix N?
Potentially, yeah. Or Secret Warriors, even, if you want to go comics.
I mean, it's interesting too because you could set them up to deal with rogue Cobra situations.
Yeah.
Because it's just like
around.
yeah, where it's just like, well, Cobra needs these guys eliminated, and I'm using these wannabe Joes as basically a termination squad.
Yeah, and without risking anybody that they give a shit about.
Yep.
Yeah, obviously, the end game of this sort of story would be that, okay, then, they prove themselves, maybe come into conflict with the actual Joes, and then everybody realizes, oh, you were being fucked with. Welcome to the team.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that would depend on what they do in the, in the process of the story. Because if they they may do stuff that they can't come back from.
Yeah, I mean, at what point do you just go, you know what? This is maybe what I was born for.
Yeah.
Maybe this is actually what I should have been doing the whole time. I agree with that, Mitch. I think that the Dreadnoks do feel like the only reason they side with Cobra is it's just like more convenient. less drug tests.
Cobra's gonna let them do what they want, to a degree, whereas G.I. Joe is not into letting them do anything that they're up for. No, I was, the Dreadnoks in the cartoon were just buffoons, and they were entertaining, but that part of that was in my mind, and then I think it was issue 36, 35. Anyway, the Dreadnoks just go on a fucking rampage, and you start to realize, like, oh shit, these guys are just insane. Like, there's a bit where so they just go down the highway and just start destroying shit. There's a truck full of hay bales. Ripper uses his giant freaking machete gun to cut the straps. The hay bales go on the road.
So they are the Knight Rider.
Torch sets them on fire.
Ask the toe cutter. He knows.
Yeah, absolutely. And they never were. And that's where they originated. They're Mad Max characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that issue ends towards the end. I think there's been one of the cars has crashed. There's people trapped inside. There's gasoline, and Buzzer throws his lit cigar at them and drives away.
It definitely makes them feel far more like a terrifying threat, because When they just it's violence for the sake of violence.
Well, and when you come at it from like me, I was born in '82, but I came of age, largely in the '90s, and by that point, the whole like it was still out there in the ether, but the whole idea of these terrifying bikers
Hmm.
had really faded away. That was more of like a '70s '80s thing, and if you go
Yeah,
back and you see the um
I think a lot of that lost its fear factor after Altamont because the government was like, this shit ain't happening no more.
Yeah, but I mean, there was still plenty. I mean, it definitely dialed back considerably for sure, though. I mean, you were still seeing bikers as villains, into the '80s and like the A Team and stuff. But
Stone
there
Cold,
was, you know,
Stone Cold,
yeah, yeah.
one of the greatest action movies of all time. I love that movie. It's so beautifully bad. Brian, if you haven't seen it, Brian Bosworth in Stone Cold is. I mean, you've got Lance Hendrickson.
Oh no, it's great.
God, who's the other bad guy? The not Michael Madsen, non-Michael Madsen guy.
Oh, and I gotta look it up.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
He's in
mean,
a bunch of Rob Zombie movies now, which
okay.
he was in. He was Michael Myers' dad in Rob Zombie's Abomination of Halloween.
Uh, William Forsythe.
William Forsythe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a movie I would definitely say put on your appendix in because it's a
Well, that I mean, like,
Hard Target might be another good one.
I would honestly say, Cobra.
Oh fuck, crime is the
Crime
disease
is
and
the
I am
disease,
the
and he's the
solution.
cure. And also, I eat pizza with a pair of giant fucking scissors.
I would say too a lot of that '80s cop stuff. If you go back and watch it through the lens of history, is frighteningly like right wing. It's
Oh,
frighteningly like
terrifyingly so.
yeah. So I think that also it's like in a modern world, what is GI Joe?
Yeah.
Is Cobra maybe not the bad guy in some cases?
In some cases, they're absolutely not. Um, but their goals in general aren't going to be for anybody's benefit. I mean, there was and they took over a town in the Midwest, and it was a town that had basically been left behind by economic concerns. Um, and you still had all the people there. I mean, they're they're a less racist, xenophobic, um, anti-science. I mean, there's a lot of parallels with our current political situation with your average Cobra.
Yeah, Mitch, you are dead on right. So so 80s Reagan propaganda.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to Larry for as a '70s kind of counterculture dude who also had the military experience and whatever. But he was living in New York City, hanging out with Steve Gerber and Jim Owsley, Christopher Priest now, those guys. So like, he's not right wing.
Which I think there's a lot of that subversion in his writing.
Yeah. Well, that
Because
was you.
Gerber does that a lot too. Gerber will give you stuff that on the surface you're like, Gerber must be a crazy, conservative. And then you like dig a little deeper in his work and you're like, oh shit, this is just
Yeah.
him clowning
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Oh,
hard.
and he wrote episodes of the G.I. Joe cartoon.
That's so wild to me that people let Steve Gerber write
They were
cartoons.
they were amazing. I think he did the one where Cobra Commander. I gotta look this up now because I think he did the one where Cobra like has their own TV station.
And that's another thing to start to think about. What would Cobra do in a current world? I mean, I can see them being very like Alex Jones. You know, I'm on the internet and I have my own, and I quote, network.
Yeah.
Where I can spew my nonsense to people who will listen. You know, I mean, QAnon is another great example of what
absolutely, you know, be out there. I mean, because they could. I mean, they do that stuff.
Yeah. Because then I think again you have to look at like what
okay, so Gerber did there's the No Place Like Springfield episode, which was I think the Prisoner.
Yeah, Prisoner would be something else I would say would probably be a good thing to look at as far as a potential Appendix N. Especially if you're doing like very specialized agents who are then like unsure about where alliances are. Especially, I mean, I don't know how much everybody knows about The Prisoner, but that is basically God, now all of a sudden I can't think of dude's name who was the prisoner. He is playing the same. Yeah, he's playing the same character he played in Secret Agent Man.
Yes.
They just couldn't say that. And he's also said he's in another movie later called Ice Station Zebra.
Oh.
And he's saying that McGowan has said that movie's great if you haven't seen it. It's
okay,
like
I haven't. I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's like they find something in the ice in Antarctica and all of the governments basically send people there and they have to deal with this fact that they don't know what it is, but they're also like, these people are basically spies. And McGowan is there and he says, you know, basically, whether people want to believe it or not, I am actually playing the same role. So that tells you that post-Prisoner, I escaped, or maybe I didn't escape. Maybe I am number one.
I mean, that's kind of where it goes. Yeah, that's the series. I got to rewatch that series because I mean,
you are number 6. I am the new number 2. I am not a number. I am a Freeman.
But yeah, I mean, so you had and Steve Gerber doing that stuff, and I think he was. It sounds like he was more of a showrunner for a while. So that's where you got a lot of that stuff that I would associate with being kind of Gerber-y ideas coming through.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was involved with the Dungeons and Dragons cartoons.
Yeah, I knew that, which I think is really kind of wild.
It
also makes a lot of sense about a show where at some point people thought it was the kids are dead.
Well, from what I'm reading, it sounds like he kind of chafed at on that show because he felt that the subject matter was at odds with the limitations on children's programming.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, there's a really good episode of that show where they meet a knight who's undead. And it's kind of like this whole, he's stuck being I mean, I will think about that episode sometimes because I'm just like, what a fucking horrible existence. You're a fucking skeleton guy now. And like, because you made a bad decision previously and now you have to basically answer to what is really the equivalent of the devil on that show, which is Avenger. What a shitty situation for one bad decision, but it is very D&D. It is very hardcore D&D.
Yeah.
You want to make a deal with the devil, you're gonna have to pay up. And it's kind of like in that case too, when you talk about the man in charge. Again, like I said, reading some Secret Six, who is Mockingbird?
Right.
Because Mockingbird's been like Luther, Mockingbird's been the Riddler. It's been fucking Amanda Waller, who is then like fought the suicide or sent the Suicide Squad against the Secret Six when actually she is controlling both
She's in
sides.
charge of both of them. Yeah.
And to me, that's fucking wild.
Well, that's my it never really went super far. Larry never did anything with it. It was supposed to be part of the 4th season, I think, of the G.I. Joe cartoon. That never happened before Sunbow stopped doing it, or the ratings declined far enough they had to kind of take a break. But there was the concept of, and it did come into the Devil's Due comics, but Larry's never done anything with it. But of the coil, which was essentially going to be after G.I. Joe the movie, you kind of have a Cobra Civil War in the cartoon where it splits off into 2 factions, one led by Cobra Commander and one led by Serpentor. And my whole take on the coil was going to be that they were just that. Here's now that because Cobra itself is a much more like established organization, they're a country, they can't do some of the stuff that Cobra used to do. So let's have Dr. Mindbender bring back Serpentor. They can be like this. They can be like the light in Young Justice, or
even the Quiet Council in X-Men,
or just even not even more like
the Illuminati,
more like the Al Qaeda to Saudi Arabia.
Well, also what happens with the Dreadnoughts, who
they're mercenaries. They just work for whoever.
Yeah, but now that there's a country,
well,
it ostensibly has rules.
I think it's they're
like, it's fun for a while to do whatever you want in this country, but don't you want to go? To me, it kind of sounds like Madripoor and the Marvel Universe.
Yeah,
where you have this country full of villains, but you've got to have some villains who are like, I can do whatever I want here, but I'm really not getting to do what I want.
I feel like Cobra Commander would lock that shit down. He's not going to let you do whatever you want.
Because wouldn't you, if you're those characters, wouldn't you just fucking chafe?
Some of those, absolutely. And those are the ones where he would, try and get them to join the coil of their own accord. But yeah, my whole thing was going to be like, oh, here's the coil. They're out they're blowing up, school buses. And
what if the coil is appealing to those characters and they think it's something else, but it really just is Cobra?
That was my whole.
That's great. That's a really interesting idea.
That was my whole take. Here's this coil. The coil. It's Serpentor coming back and saying, we're warriors. We need to take countries by force. We got to do all this stuff. And then you would see, periodically or whatever, Serpentor talking to someone. Because he's just a created being. Mm-hmm. He's a clone. So yeah, he's answering to Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander just put stuff in his head, like, yeah, do whatever you want, or do stuff within this, do whatever I tell you.
Yeah, and here's your mission statement.
You do it the way you want to do it, but in the end, it all comes back to me. So yeah, that would be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have this, group of, we've got a Cobra outpost in, South America or whatever, and they've kind of gone down the shitter. Let's just have that. Let's try and get them to join the coil. And then we can not worry. They can be cannon fodder now. We don't care,
And we can even send our GI Joe unit against them and make an example.
Test all the the technology that we don't want to use. We're not ready to use with our trustworthy troops yet.
Or even kind of the bring it back to kind of more mainstream comics, the idea of JSA going into Kandahar to do a Black Adam. It's like, what if you send this G.I. Joe group into, Cobra's country? Is that an act of war?
Oh, yeah.
It's an act. So are you, is this one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm instigating a situation because I want the UN to step on G.I. Joe's funding? Or I'm just saying there's so many, you're basically telling me that, you've got all these intricate, almost overt combat with heavy espionage overtones.
Yeah, and the espionage part is always what it is, and the political aspect of, again, Hamo was all about that stuff. And then how does the guy on the ground navigate that? Do they even care?
Yeah.
And that's back to the root of the name, because what the consensus seems to be is that the term GI Joe originated in World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, GI stands for general issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you'd have a general issue rifle or a general issue, vest or whatever. Here's a general issue Joe, regular Joe. So the guys on the ground are just another piece of equipment that the leaders are using for their goals.
Would that also be like, would you consider a GI Joe unit that, or are those because they're more specialized? They're
you're not gonna throw away GI Joes, even if unless you really have a goal in mind. They're too useful, too skilled, I would think. You're not just gonna burn them to burn them, but there's always that calculus being made. There's a lot of GI Joes out there.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is like, how big is the organization? And then you've also got, what is the Soviet version as well?
You got the October Guard.
Guard.
And I'm also very big into Action Force.
Action Force. Why does that?
Which was what they called GI Joe in the UK.
Yeah.
And in that iteration, they took a lot of they made up a bunch of new characters, but they also took a lot of existing characters and then changed their nationalities to make it a more European team. So like Steeler, who's from Pittsburgh, in the US, became Greek. And there was some other stuff like that. And they're a very much international team. So I've kind of considered them in my head like a UN.
Would Predator be on your appendix then?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I love that initial scene of them in the helicopter. I think it's one of my favorite scenes. It is the most broiest scene of all time, but it just makes me so fucking like, this is an 80s movie. Like Commando, yep. Raw Deal.
Well, I mean, except that's not that great a movie, but yeah.
What?
It's
Schwarzenegger riding around in a top-down Cadillac playing I can't get no satisfaction full of fucking guns.
It's one of the weaker Schwarzenegger movies. And I think he only did it because they like made him.
What about Red Heat?
Yeah. I mean, most of Schwarzenegger's filmography that's not overtly sci-fi.
What is the movie where it's got Joe Piscopo in it and Treat Williams, and they're cops, and one of them comes back as undead, but they're following apart.
God, that movie's so.
But doesn't that kind of fit a little bit of the vibe though? Tango and Cash as well.
Tango and Cash, yeah. I mean, there's the sci-fi aspects too that you can't leave out of GI Joe in my mind.
Like the hidden.
Just I mean, you got and there's I'm trying to think of a non-awful like ninja movie that would fit into this.
Oh, Master Ninja, motherfucker! Master Ninja, Master Ninja 2. What would Lee Van Cleef do? I loves me some Lee Van Cleef.
Oh yeah, Lee Van Cleef is amazing. And yes, I'm definitely
Angel Eyes.
I love Monster Vipers. The 30th Pursuit of Cobra introduced Jungle Bats, which were just it was just a normal battle android trooper in jungle camo, but they included a bunch of like battle damage parts with it and talked about it as being, I can't remember if it was somewhere, it was a designer or just in some fiction or something, but the idea that like Cobra would just leave these bats might just have been left in the jungle, and who knows, the moisture and shit might have done to them. I wouldn't say that they would become sentient, but they're going to act differently.
I mean, you could just like, I know we were talking a little bit about this the other day based upon like that awesome armadillo you grabbed me, but like drop pods.
Yeah.
So maybe they just dropped them there and left them, and now they just activate.
Yeah.
That in itself, I mean, there you go. There's your predator situation right there.
Well, they that was in Pursuit of Cobra. They went with a whole unofficial, sort of official predator inspired subset. That was the jungle, because they were like, here's the desert, here's Arctic, here's urban, and then jungle. And most of the figures released under the jungle theme were fairly overtly homaging predator characters. That Recondo is absolutely Blaine. They came up with the Cobra character Shadow Tracker, who is just the predator. So that's all in there. I love that. That's the other piece of GI Joe that I think, and He-Man has it too, where what do kids like? Let's just put that all in here in some form. We might tweak it a little bit to fit in, but it's all going to go in here. We've got cowboys, we've got aliens, we've got robots, we've got Mad Max, we've got ninjas, and it's all just part of this.
Super Spike, you're dead on right. My wife and I have been watching the McElroy brothers on their McElroy family channel on YouTube, and they get together now every Monday and they play Fortnite. It has very, very heavy Awful Squad vibes, which was a group that they played Battlegrounds Unknown on when those guys were part of Polygon. They would do they would do Awful Squad every week, which was them playing, that game together with a bunch of people in the office. So this has that very vibe, but as Cassandra and I were watching it, she said, Fortnite feels to me a lot in some ways like Kingdom Hearts, because it's like, oh, here's all the shit. Everything Disney was like, here's everything. She said, but this is more, here's everything through the lens of a 12-year-old hyped up on Red Bull. Because the group that they were playing the other day, it was Griffin was playing as Blanca, who he referred to as Swole Yoda. Travis was a Mothman, and Justin was an old man Goku. And it was just like, what the fuck am I watching? And at one point, one of them was in a monster truck, one of them was riding a warg, and the other one was on a pig. A massive pig, and they were just running around shooting people. And it was just like, what is happening? This is just a feast for my 12-year-old imagination. And I think, you can do that with like G.I. Joe. I think, you can do it with Master of the Universe as well. It is very much like you said, Matt, it's like, what's cool right now? Let me mishmash it into this current IP. Oh, damn, that's awesome. So my question about that would be, is your duty to your country everything, or is it your duty to your unit?
I mean, I think that's going to be down to the individual player. Frankly, because I do feel like everybody has got to make that choice for themselves. I feel like most GI Joes.
So would that be a truth of the game? Personal loyalty is on the player's shoulders. Where do their personal loyalties lie is up to the players.
I would say so. I want to at least give people that flexibility.
I think that's a truth of the game then, because I think you can definitely push them to have to make those decisions. You can give them options. And one thing I would recommend with a game like this is have note cards at the beginning or private messages where you tell people like, hey, as part of your background, you've got a sick mother.
Yeah, or I mean, I would probably want people to, create their characters in a vacuum.
Yeah, what's a secret you have? Kind of pulling that Apocalypse World style.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some mechanics around that in here, which is great. And I also like that they do and I'm sure this is, a lot of this seems very like D&D with the serial numbers filed off from what I know of D&D, but it's a solid system. But there's some stuff in here where you can get, there's perks that you can take as a character, and you get one for free with no disadvantages. But every one you take after that comes with a snag, is how they refer to it, of some kind. So it's like you're really lucky, but also you're a gambling addict.
I love shit like that. One thing too is I really like, and something to think about when you're doing character creation, is there's a game called Dread. It's a horror one-shot game, and there's no dice. It's the randomizer is a Jenga tower.
Oh,
and it's a fantastic game, but you don't roll stats in that game. You're literally given a questionnaire. And one of the questions is like, what's something that you can adjust the questionnaire any way you want. But one of the ones I always loved is what's in your pocket right now? Also, like, what's something you've done that you would never want to tell anyone?
Okay. I like
it's
that.
Like it's a really cool game that way. I've run it for Lovecraftian horror. I've used it for a zombie game. I've played it where like Zach has run it, and he's done like kind of a weird horror on a whaling boat in the 1880s. You can use it for anything, but it's such a different system. But one of the things I really love is that idea about the questionnaire, because it challenges you so hard to like really think about, like, it's got a lot, I think, in common with the history stuff in Apocalypse World, but at the same time, it's where that builds your relationships between people. The one in Dread is like, who are you? There's one like, what is the thing that scared you as a child? And you're supposed to be thinking about this from the confines of like who your character is. And I find that to be very, very interesting.
I love those ties and the background stuff to fill out and drive. A good player is going to use that stuff to determine what they're going to do in a situation.
That's something I would recommend maybe stealing completely. Again, filing the numbers off of Apocalypse World, that they have a history score with the other players. And it is things like, who have you known since basic training, or who did you meet in a special ops course,
right?
And why did they fuck you over to get ahead? I mean, campaign fronts, I think, front one would be the Coil. Front two would probably be Cobra, and front three would be G.I. Joe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and
who is your cousin twice removed? It's fair. You don't want to get in a Skywalker situation.
That's the other thing I've over the years, G.I. Joe has accumulated such a wonderful group of different factions that could all come into play.
Oh, I told you what I'm playing. I took my just for the chat to know, I took my inspiration from a Blue Oyster Cult song called "The Red and the Black." That's about Canadian Mounties. Oh, I'm playing a fucking Canadian Mountie.
I mean, I would love
a little bit of that, a little bit of Jacques Rougeau.
Hell yeah. You could I think there's an option in here to have an electrified nightstick.
Yeah.
So
if no one's ever heard that song, go listen to it, because it's a fucked up view of the Mounties. And it's also it's almost proto thrash metal. It's so fast. And for a 70s band, that's wild. Also, there's a good Mike Watt and the Minutemen cover of it too, which is even faster.
All right, now I'm trying to remember what you use. Rules of the game is.
These are truths of the game are. These apply across the board.
Okay.
Rules of the game are. This is more the crunchy bit of like, this is more like characters will die.
Yeah, I think they did technically retcon Big Lob into a reservist.
Oh God, that's fucking amazing. To me, rules of the game are more built around truths or expectations. Rules are this is the hard and the fast of it. You know.
Okay.
I always think it's kind of hard. Well, you know what? Let's while you kind of continue to brainstorm, I'm gonna grab
Yeah.
the actual write up for that from Mike Shea because I want to
Oh,
make sure
yeah.
I because Mike Shea, this is his. We're using Mike Shea stuff, which I again highly recommend. I don't always agree with everything Mike Shea says or thinks, but I do think his lazy dungeon master stuff and prep is one of the best tools you can use when prepping games. Just the philosophy behind it is so good. It's so sound.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see if I can get a group together for this.
I know you can. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I'm down. I know there's other people that are
with the
totally
demands
down.
on time and all that stuff, and we're a small group, GI Joe fans. We're out there, but anyway, I'm hopeful, and I would love to have an experience to do storytelling on a level. I talk a good fucking game, but I haven't put the rubber to the road.
I think, and maybe that I would recommend before you do this, run a very simple system game for like a one shot.
Oh yeah, and I probably should and will for Extra Life. I just got to figure out what I want to do.
I would recommend first time folks probably take a stab at something like Lasers and Feelings because it's only 2 stats.
Mm.
And it is a more narrative driven game. And narrative driven games can be, I think, for a lot of people, they're, yeah, if I was at GI Joe, my name would be Weekend. But like you take a game like Lasers and Feelings, which is literally built to be Star Trek. So you use that as kind of the background, and then you can go wild with it.
I mean, other than the character creation is probably a little more complex than maybe would people want to do for a one shot. But I was actually I've been very tempted to run just because I love the setting and that whole era of stuff was the Spirit of 76.
See, that's the thing is character creation for Apocalypse World games is easy.
It is easy, yeah. But that's what I was kind of tempted to take a stab at just because that is my jam.
That game is awesome.
And well, yeah, looking through the playbook for that with with the stuff we were working on for Hard Times, it's like, oh yeah, this is this is right up my alley.
I mean, it's a really good idea. It's one of those things too. Think about it as you would any type of story, but I always say when I'm running a game, I try to think about it less as a book and more as like a movie.
Yeah.
Or in that case, like a TV movie. So the first thing I would do is I would figure out like this is my overall, 3-part narrative. And then I would look at it and say, where can I cut for TV breaks? And then I would just run one and have enough stuff going on at the end, enough like secondary storyline that you could pick up from there and run another one if everyone was excited about it. So, everyone has like a B plot, but make sure your A plot is wrapped up. So just run it as a series of like TV movies, you know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know, what was that? Kolchak. It's a good example of, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Kolchak, I think, is the first two Kolchaks are great TV movies. They should have just kept doing those. They never should have done a series. Just do a movie once or twice a year. But yeah, I think that would be a TV movie by way of HBO. I don't recommend trilogies to start off with.
No.
I think trilogies are, unless you have a brilliant idea, I think trilogies are hard because it's a sweet spot between that ongoing, I can drag a plot line out, and I have to meet a time restraint.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was going to find this very quickly, and I'm. So one thing when he looks at, he calls it spiral campaign design. When he talks about 6 truths, these are like your 6 things that set your game apart from anybody else's game. And these also kind of let the players know what the vibe is. So like his 6 truths for a game he was getting ready to do was, you know, sages and cultists describe the coming of the black moon and elder evil that will swallow the world. Monsters have been sighted along where once were safe roads. The populations of the whole villages are disappearing without a trace.
Okay.
The floating obsidian citadel has moved above the Crag Teeth Mountains to the north. So it's like they're specific. I would almost say yours would move. Yeah. Those would move to rules of the game.
Rules then, yeah.
And that was on me for doing it.
Oh no, that's you know.
Like one of the things I've got going on down Outlands right now is the Bagman. Did we talk about this on Prep School before?
I don't know if we. Oh yes, I don't know if we talked about it on Prep School, but I do remember you mentioning it.
So the Bagman is this creepy urban myth in D&D. What? It's this creepy thing of like, there's the potential that this thing will crawl out of bags of holding and drag people away. And it is such an evocative, strange, creepy, like, I think it came out of the Van Richten's guide. And I love it. I think it's and I used it because, you know, the players are children. And they need a creepy fucking thing to be scared of. And they have embraced it. And I think that's what you want. But that's a plot that it's just going to dangle until I get to it. So another thing Mike Shea talks about is knives. So sometimes they're also called strings, where your players give you something attached to their player that where you're like, oh, this is just something that might be going on in the background, and you decide when you want to pull on that string. Shea sometimes refers to these as knives.
Okay.
Your players hand you knives. Don't hesitate to stab them in the back with them. If they're going to give you something where it's like going to build potential character beats later on, use them. So yeah, I think that's another thing to keep in mind, especially you get those with character building. I think that would also be a rule of the game. To me, it's like, give your characters depth.
Yes.
While they may appear to be, real American heroes, what does that actually mean? Especially in a current society with the internet. Where people can find all sorts of shit about you.
Yeah. Well, that's, with the October Guard, where it was, when the series started, they were very overtly, against G.I. Joe, and then sometimes their goals would align. And then as, through the 80s, Russia changed so drastically.
Well, fuck, look at Russia right now.
And then now it's back. Yeah.
Instituting a fucking draft.
What would the October Guard be today?
Yeah, where would they be? Is the whole thing in Ukraine right now happening? And
well,
I mean, I would hazard to say, are the Russian Guard fighting for the Russians right now?
Well, in the comics they're not currently, but the other thing too is Hama deliberately took, kind of tried to make them similar to Joe in that they're members of the October Guard from all over what was the Soviet Union. So I think they've got they may have a Ukrainian member. I think they definitely had one that was from the former Czech Republic.
Yeah.
So like you've got this team comprised of people from countries that don't even exist anymore necessarily.
So where does that leave them as well? Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina. I mean, you have these characters who I don't think are terribly explored.
Not really. No, I mean they've delved into them a little bit more, and he brought a bunch of them back as cyborgs, which was interesting, but that had previously been dead.
Yeah, also there's that, because you can. How far do you want to lean into the sci-fi?
Oh, it's part and parcel. You had, as far as I don't know if I would necessarily, though it is ending shortly here, so it would be easy enough to say, okay, this is the stopping point and just pick threads up from that. But my stories definitely kind of begin at the end of the original Marvel run in terms of where things are at. But now with the IDW run ending with issue 300, I believe is what the plan is, and nothing else on the horizon currently.
Is that ending because they lost? Do they not have the license anymore?
The license expires at the end of the year. Yeah.
So where do you think that license is going to end up?
It's a good question. If unless Hasbro had somebody specific in mind that they're trying to get it to go to, I don't know if they just put it out to the open market. I don't know who would actually be interested if not IDW, but I don't know what condition IDW is in.
Yeah, I mean, because that was a big title for them.
I've heard some varying things. Well, Transformers has been big for them. But I also know that, now they've done some stuff with Boom. Hasbro's had some kind of a relationship with them, but I honestly don't know who would be interested in grabbing those licenses. If not IDW, frankly. So I guess we'll see. I don't know if they've announced if they have anybody.
Yeah, like, it's so weird.
I could see somebody being interested in, just in a general sense. But G.I. Joe is a less, it's just, it doesn't have the cachet it used to.
Do you think that's because Marvel might be, you never can tell with Marvel. I mean, I think with Marvel, is the price right?
Yeah, there's no confirmation outside of of who might be taking these licenses on, and I'm sure they could piecemeal them too. I'm sure if somebody wanted to get Transformers and not GI Joe, Hasbro would do that. Speculation is that they're losing the license just because they can't afford to keep doing it.
Which is weird because that's been their bread and butter.
Well, they did have a slice of the Star Wars license as well. So that's speculated as part of why, the loss of revenue from that. So their big thing right now is probably Transformers, or not Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that they will still have after. And it looks like they've got Star Trek. But I'm assuming all their Hasbro licenses are going away, so that doesn't leave them with a ton.
No, I mean, I also look at I do look like Motu, and DC let that go.
Yeah,
which I'm shocked. They did so much good stuff with that license.
Honestly, though, I have more faith in Dark Horse to do something interesting with it.
Well, we've heard in private chat, because of contacts David knows, kind of what their plan, some of the plans are for New Eternia, and it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think just because it's going to be a bigger, like at DC, it's a licensed book. Like they're not relying; it's not a big deal for them necessarily. Especially for a property that's it comes and goes in terms of popularity. But for Dark Horse, it's going to be a bigger deal. It's going to be a bigger book for them. That's the same, Marvel, of course, is going to, give Star Wars attention because it's a huge property. Mm-hmm. But if they were to pick G.I. Joe up again, I don't know how much focus it would actually get.
Yeah.
So, but I'll be curious to see how it plays out. I am glad that we're getting, up to 300 issues, up to issue 300 for ARH. Now that it hasn't been an actual 300 Larry written issues consecutively, because they did have some fill-ins in the Marvel run towards the beginning and the end. But he has written over 300 issues for G.I. Joe. So
I wonder if that's the longest run anybody's had on a book.
I think Eric Larson still has him beat for Savage Dragon.
Oh, I forget about Savage Dragon all the time, which is sad because that's a really fun book.
He's still doing it.
Yeah. I don't think he'll ever stop that book.
No, he is, unless he can't. So let's see here.
He is kind of the stalwart of the Image guys.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone on to be like anything else. It's been like, no, I wanted to make my comic book, and I'm making my comic book.
Making my comic book, and I'm going to continue making my comic book until you won't let me anymore, or until I can't afford to.
Which is, say what you will about him in any other way, but I respect the hell out of someone who does that.
Okay, so that's up to 265. For Savage Dragon. So he's got a little ways to go. But since he's, written and drawn every issue.
That's so nuts. So when you look at something like that, I know we're a little off topic talking about comics in general, which is fine because it's our show and we do what we want here.
Yes.
Do you look at someone like Eric Larson and can you put him in the same kind of conversation as like a Kirby?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say I completely agree. I think he has to be in that conversation because of dedication to the craft and longevity, if nothing else, and the fact that he again, he's done something that I don't think we have anybody else who's done anything remotely similar to that.
I mean, you've got Dave Sim, but he's Dave Sim, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, Larson has kind of got, he's done some interesting things over in Dragon where it's like, yeah, we're just gonna do actual pornography in here, but it's my comic, so fuck it,
I
Yeah,
also think sometimes Eric Larson does things just to be like, I'm going to see how many people I can piss off.
there's definitely some of that, and yeah, Eric Larson will use his platform to grind some axes, but a lot of other creators do that too.
Well, I think there is and everyone can have their own opinion about this, and I'm not going to disagree with their opinion. I think there is a point in comic book creator age where they all do this. Where they turn into grumpy old man yells at clouds.
Well, I'll be curious to see how that plays out, because I mean, admittedly, I haven't read Savage Dragon in quite a while. I read it for a long time.
Yeah, I think I had like the first 150 issues.
Yeah, I can't remember where. I think I dropped off not long after his son took over as the lead. After Eric killed off the original dragon.
Yeah. Which again, what a ballsy move.
Totally.
Because that's like to me that's up there with like, did you ever read Byrne's Generations stuff for DC?
Yeah, yep.
I mean, to me that's what comic books would be like. Characters die, things happen.
Right.
It's whenever one of the big two tries to do that, though, they get such a backlash they can't do it. People don't want their precious characters to have to move on. To me, that's far more interesting when someone's like, I'm done. And this is why I like do that in D&D. Like, I'll play a character till a point where I'm like, this is when this character should be done. Whether they die or whether they retire, whether they quit, whatever it is, this is the point when they're done. Because their story is over. And even if it's just this story. But they shouldn't, if this is where I see the logical conclusion, this is the logical conclusion for the story they're in.
Yeah, I mean, to approach your character and say, oh yeah, here's the story for them. I'm done this. I can move on.
Yeah. I mean, I understand a little bit more like at Marvel and DC for the mere fact that they're giant corporate entities now.
Yeah.
And you also have creators who come in and take over books. And when they take over books, they're like, but I want to play with these toys. But I think that's always interesting when creators come in and they say, give me your huddled masses of characters.
Right.
Give me the stuff that no one wants. And they do something interesting with it, because I get frustrated with Marvel and DC because they're constantly like, well, these are the books that sell. These are the characters that sell. It's like, yeah, they sell because you don't ever have the balls to stick with something that doesn't.
Yeah, there is that. Absolutely. But at the same time, I mean, I do see them they're willing to give stuff chances periodically, and whether that's just because they want to maintain the rights or whatever. It's like, oh, it's been 5 years, we got to do a Power Pack book. So we can hang on all those trademarks. Whatever. But there's a damage control book going right now. So, and they didn't need to do that.
No, but I mean, again, if they have an idea and if they have creators who come to them with interesting ideas, fuck yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah.
Give us something new. Give us something different. Give us something that has something exciting. And that's why, I'm very pumped about this idea you had, because it's a genre and a property that it's like something that I necessarily wouldn't explore. So when you're like, yeah, this is something I'm passionate. And this is another thing I would say about running a game. Don't run a game if you don't have a passion for the story you're going to tell, or the property, or possibly the players, because I'll have ideas, but I'll say, man, I don't think I would want to run this for the mere fact that I don't know if I have the passion for this.
Mm.
You know, there's ideas I have where I'll be like, you know, I guess like I've had for a long time, and I love running horror stuff. Have you ever seen Planet of the Vampires?
No, I think I've heard of it though.
I think it's a Mario Bava movie. It's
Okay.
really cool. Also, you can tell it heavily influenced Alien.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen. There was the other one that's very alien like that. Was that John Carpenter? Early John Carpenter. I can't remember the name of the movie now. That also inspired Alien a bunch.
But the idea, and also the movie. Have you ever seen Life Force?
I've not seen Life Force,
which is a Tobe Hooper movie.
Maybe it's Life Force I'm thinking of then.
That is a space vampire movie, and it's got Patrick Stewart in it. It's pretty epic in tone. I love that movie because it's wild as fuck, and it like made no money. It might have been like his highest budgeted movie ever.
Wow.
And also he turned down like another big movie to do Life Force.
Interesting.
But I love the idea of space vampire.
Oh yeah.
Of like a ship floating out in space that turns out to have like vampires on it. And you know, it's in space, no one can hear you scream, but in space, no, you know, if you're on a spaceship with no ability to open the shutters and see the sun, you're basically in a big floating fucking gothic castle. So, I mean, I think that would be, you know, take all your vampire tropes and stick them on a spaceship.
Yeah.
And see what happens. I've always like wanted to kind of run that game, but finding the right system and also finding the right players, finding the right time, all that plays into it. And what I realize is I don't have the passion to run that because it's going to be too much work I don't want to do. So when you look at something like what you're talking about doing, I mean, and I'm sure the chat will agree with me, your passion for it like is very infectious. And that's awesome because that's like one of the main points about running games is that you're trying to get people to sit down with you at a table and tell a story together. And there has to be some passion behind that. And it has to be something where you can get other people to get as passionate about it as you are. I think I said this yesterday. There's nothing better than in Down Outlands for me than when Ryan or any other character, I hit them with a cliffhanger and they look at me or say it in the chat and they say, I fucking hate you. Because I know I got them with a cliffhanger that now has them like chomping at the bit for the next episode.
Right. No, I mean, that's it. I do worry a little bit that I'm too passionate and that it's going to get impenetrable, but I hopefully I can rein that in. And the movie that I was thinking of was Dark Star.
Yeah, Dark Star is great. That was a student film.
I think so, yeah. I mean,
have you seen it?
I've not.
It's an interesting flick. It's a very interesting movie. But yeah, it was his USC student film.
Oh.
But they remade with like a better budget.
Okay.
But, you know, I mean, I think that's a huge thing is like if you have a passion for it, you can do whatever you want. A system is just a set of potential rules. So, you know, if you look at it and say, well, I like this. I mean, you were talking about like it being D&D with the serial numbers filed off. One of my favorite things that they've finally kind of done with D&D is they said, you know, this is a toolkit. You don't need to use all the fucking tools.
Right.
So if you look at your G.I. Joe game and you're like, some of this shit works really well, but what I'm really interested in is telling a kick-ass G.I. Joe story. then
Well,
just
I mean, that's when you get into some of that stuff, it's like here's here's all these rules for like vehicle combat or whatever. It's like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, fuck that. Just make it streamlined. I think that's the best thing you can do with something like that, because my guesstimation is you want to do some vehicle combat because it's fucking G.I. Joe.
Well, sure, you want to throw it in there, but I want to make it, I've played enough Shadowrun to know that when you do stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, you've got a Decker on your team. And whenever you do anything inside, cyberspace, everybody else just sits around and twirls their thumbs.
Well, and I think that's the thing, even in like Star Wars.
Yeah.
If you're going to be if you have somebody in your group who's like, I want to be an ace pilot, well, then that means we need to have spaceship shit.
Yeah.
Because what I don't want to have happen is, and I've had this happen, where I had an ace in a group and what I had planned had no real spaceship shit in it.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, how can I put a dress on a pig here? And you need to be able to balance that, because you want everybody to have fun. So, then it becomes a challenge in a cool way of you saying, how can I add this scene in, even if it's just the Bond scene at the beginning of the film where it's Bond doing some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Which is just meant to make you get to the da-dun, da-dun part of the intro. So, that's, I think, something to keep in mind as well. But I think it's important to really kind of buckle down on your premise and idea, which you've got, which is amazing. I definitely didn't have it the first time I ran games.
Thanks for joining us, Mitch. Hopefully,
Mitch, you are awesome. Thank you. Stay safe. Stay safe and keep helping your fellow humans. That's amazing, and you should.
Well, not his fellow humans, but his fellow residents. We all know that Mitch is not a human.
Yeah, that's fair. Keep helping the fleshy ones, Mitch.
Yes.
But yeah, I think what we accomplished today is a huge thing, because you started to put to paper what you want to get accomplished.
Yeah, I think I'm good with the germ of my idea. I just need to figure out what, like, I've got the bones. I need to put some meat on them and say, okay, what are they actually going to do? What are the goals of, if they're going to be operating as goals, or as pawns essentially of these dreadnoks. The dreadnoks are interesting characters in and of themselves. Are they working at the behest of Cobra, or are they just doing their own thing and hoping they don't get caught? And
well, what I would say too, when you start to look at it this way, is maybe rather than looking at it on such a macro level, which is kind of what we're doing.
Oh yeah.
Is look at it, start to kind of boil down to your micro level of what is my plot for, this. Am I wanting to do, like, what's my job? Am I doing a heist? Am I doing, am I just doing like some type of fight, or what am I, that's, I think sometimes I struggle with that very much, is like trying to figure out, like, what are we doing? Because I want to do everything. So, like Star Wars, our current Star Wars game was supposed to be kind of the classic casino, thing.
And then immediately,
but the players decided we don't want to do that. We want to go do weird stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, we're doing weird stuff now. And now when we finally got to the big adventure, it's been super cool, because the heist, not even the heist, the casino adventure part still plays a huge component in it, but it's no longer the main component.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a cool thing. So you also have to kind of remember that as much as you are controlling as the person running the game, you're really only controlling the initial. And after that, it turns into, okay, so now is the cooperative competitive point of our storytelling.
Well, and I've definitely seen stuff, when you can tell when a GM is trying too hard to get the players to go, and you see it in movies too, where it's like, oh, I'm going to make you enjoy all the cool stuff I came up with, even if it's going to completely detract from the story we're telling.
Yeah, there's a thing that Mike Shea says that I agree. He says that the players don't give a shit about all your backstories, all your NPCs. They don't give a shit about your world. So don't overplan. What they give a shit about is what's immediately in front of them.
Yes.
So if you can give them something exciting immediately in front of them that that carrot dangle makes them buy into something, you're already doing better than most people. So it's important to like, what is the carrot I'm dangling right now and where does it go? And it's the same thing he says is like, don't build this tremendous story, because what's going to happen is on your way to the tremendous story, they're going to meet a goblin you're going to have to name right on the spot. You're going to name him like Nugnuts.
Yeah.
And then all they're going to want to do is do stuff with Nugnuts.
Yeah.
So, realize that. So be flexible enough in thought and process to figure out how Nugnuts fits into your overall narrative. So when they're like, yeah, but what's Nugnuts doing? You can go, Nugnuts is going over here, baby. And where Nugnuts is really going is where the story is.
Yeah, back to your main story.
Yeah. And also, with that knives thing again, when your players give you something, don't be afraid to ask the dreaded question of like, well, what does that mean to you? Let your players tell the story. When you have blank spots where you don't know, just say, well, what is that? Just ask them and they'll tell you.
Yeah.
And then you just go, okay, well, then that's what it is. It helps so much. Like when you're not sure what's over that hill, you ask them what's over the hill. And they tell you and you go, yep, that's exactly what's over the hill. And then that's what's over the hill and you go from there. It's that kind of flexibility of thought, process, and imagination that allows you to tell the best story. And we're all capable of it and we're all good at it. We just need to put it into practice. It is like stretching a muscle you didn't know you had. And once you start to stretch it, you're like, holy shit, this muscle's really strong. And because you're not doing it alone, if you allow them to, the players in your game they'll tell the story and then all you have to do is facilitate it. So I think that's really, look at what you're doing from more of a micro perspective for a little bit and think about like the elevator pitch. Like, and again, I think if it's intimidating to think about a trilogy, think about it in, that script writing elevator pitch idea of like, what is this? I've got one shot at this film. What does the film look like? What is my pitch? Dreadnoughts want, what do Dreadnoughts want? Dreadnoughts want something out of a secret government bunker that is a 60s LSD weapon.
And I mean, maybe that's part of it too, is they do all this stuff and they haven't figured out what the hell, like, past their immediate goal. And it's like, oh shit, now we have a team of G.I. Joes that we have to keep finding shit for them to do so they don't figure out that we're screwing with them.
As far as like, and it doesn't have to be what they all want, because like you said, they're kind of fucked up. It's like maybe one of them just says, you know what, this is what I want. I do want to watch like a small town fucking burn. So you can use something like the Crazies as a good place to steal from and say, what if the government does have like a Trixie virus and they just want you to steal it?
Yeah.
They don't tell you that that's what it is. They tell you it's maybe an antigen, and then, it gets out. What happens then? I mean, that's a cool thing too, is you can take a property and then you can vastly change the genre tone. I always look at they did it on Clone Wars, but there's an actual series short. I think there's like 2 or 3 books that are Star Wars horror. They're straight up zombie. They're straight up zombie stories where like bioweapon gets out on a prison ship.
Right? I mean,
and some of the stormtroopers become fucking zombies. And they did it with like mind worms, I think, on Clone Wars.
oh, nice.
But it's gory as fuck. I mean, it is a straight up zombie story. And it's cool to think like, oh, there's areas that you can take this very familiar galaxy far, far away, and you can dip it into some pretty dark shit. I think Marvel's doing a little bit of that now with if they stick to the tone and tenor of Werewolf by Night being an actual, that trailer is perfect. It's a Universal Monsters feel through the lens of a 70s grindhouse horror movie.
Well, I've heard it's comedy.
And that's fine. I mean, think about how many 70s horror movies there's an overt sense of comedy. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's some darkly funny shit in that movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and I think you can easily go there.
I'll be curious how they strike the balance, I guess.
Death Trooper, that's what it's called, Super Spike. Death Trooper. It's great. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I listened to the audiobooks. It's good stuff. But yeah, I'm also intrigued what they're going to do with something like that. And then how do you get, and I think for you, Matt, where you're at is it's like trying to figure out how you get where you want to go with genre and everything else. I mean, if you just want to tell a straight up, do you want to just tell a straight up G.I. Joe story?
Yeah.
And if that's what it is, okay, well, what is that? What is a straight up G.I. Joe story? What does it mean? What is that? What is the, even looking at like, sometimes when I run stuff, I'll say, okay, what's the greatest hits version of this?
Yeah.
How do I get to the greatest hits version of superheroes? How do I get to the greatest hits version of, D&D? How do I get us where I think we need to be in order for it to be something where, I mean, this is the thing too, I try to keep in mind. I want a session of a game where people have fun and we're at the end of the game or the session or whatever it is, the trilogy, that they sit back and go, damn, that was really fun. I love it. I love a game where we can talk about it 6 months from now when somebody goes, hey, remember that thing we did?
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
Me. Come on, hands. My hands have stopped working.
Oh, well, I really need to go to the bathroom. So maybe we should
we'll call it there.
We're at hour 2, so I think we're at a good spot.
Hey, thank you everybody for jumping on with us today. And
yeah, this has been fabulous. COJ or core chat crew, whatever you want to call yourselves. I don't even know. Sexy Binkses.
Sexy Binks.
You're the best. Always.
You always are. October 6th is our appreciation night.
Woo!
So yeah. Matthew, where can they find you?
You can find me every Tuesday on the Dave Wonder channel for Tiny Mang Tuesdays. You can find me on Instagram, HypnoHustlers_customs. Twitter, I'd repost stuff. I like stuff there. But at Hypno Hustlin'. And yeah, most Sundays here on the No Worlds United channel for the prep school.
For prepping. You can find me tomorrow night down in Outlands on this very channel. It will be a big one. Yeah, strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Things are about to get fucked up. You can find me next Friday. Bad at Games. I don't know what we're playing. Douglas, the casual one, wants us to play some Dota. And he's going to show me how to play Dota.
All right.
And it should be pretty wild. So that might be happening. He put a request in this weekend of like, hey, I want to come on Bad at Games. I was like, well, what do you want to play, man? Because usually we play like narrative games together. And he's like, Dota. And I was like, man, all right, I'm going to be real bad at it. He's like, perfect. So, and then next Sunday, prep school, we are prepping some mighty Down Outlands. So it'll be good. We'll have the fallout of what happens tomorrow night. I will say this. We've got Skitch and Akko figuring out whether or not they're going to help NG escape Bitopia, which is a form of heaven. And to do so, they have to trick a archangel named Baz. You have Savannah and the fact that she's being asked to find Norhand, and Norhand's been kidnapped by her own sister.
Oh.
You have Charity and Twig going on a field trip to Mount Olympus. That should end terribly because Felix's mother, Hera, does not want him there. And then last but not least, you have Monty finding himself on Stormsong, where they find a downed Charity who's been lost to them for a while. And you find she has let Magnar out. So, and Mr. Magnar is fucking terrifying. So we'll see what happens there. He was a player character in Domains of Dread, run by none other than Orin Veidt, and then became one of the primary antagonists. So think Venom, except for if Venom was made out of insects rather than symbiotic sludge. All right, that's it. Minnesota goodbye over. We will see you soon. Bye. Stay safe, you sexy binks. You